Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and we got a great one for you today. Today, we're actually hitting episode 50, and in honor of that, I actually have on Dan Staton of Elk Shape. And if you've been listening for a while now, you know that he kind of was the initial catalyst that started this whole thing. So I want to thank Dan, of course, one, for coming on, two, for inspiring me when I went to his Elk Shape camp, and three, for the great stories that he tells this week. So I don't want to ruin anything. He tells some stories that he hasn't really shared too much of, some antelope stuff, and of course, we're not going to talk to Elk Shape without hearing an elk story. So hopefully we get him back on soon, because I think he was just hitting his groove when we ran out of time and we had a limited window. But I hope you guys enjoy, and of course, don't forget to share the podcast with everybody out there and help us grow. So that being said, let's go ahead and let Dan tell you his stories. Thank you. All right, Dan, welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, brother. How are you?
Thanks for having me, man. I'm good.
That's awesome, man. I've told you before, and I've mentioned on the podcast several times, that you were basically the first step in inspiring this podcast, getting it going, and what I'm calling my side hustle, which I know you're big into. So I wanted to say thank you, of course, and I'm super excited that we did get you on the podcast, and we're going to get you out here for number 50, as it turns out. So it's all working out pretty great for us here. Been doing it now about a year, but I can't imagine too many people don't know who you are. But let's go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Congrats on 50 episodes, man. I've been doing podcasts for 6 years, and I haven't even hit 300 yet, and I've been pretty consistent. But yeah, that's 50 is a big deal. So congratulations, guys. I'm Dan. I am just an average dude with probably a not average appreciation or even passion for elk hunting. Some might call it obsessed, but that's fine. I'm obsessed with elk hunting, and I make a lot of decisions based on elk hunting, and kind of my North Star. And that's really all you need to know. Other than that, I'm a family man, faith first, and just super stoked to have this gift and to live in this country and to have found archery and to have found elk bugling. So yeah, that's all you need to know.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I think that what you're doing out there with the YouTube and the Instagram and all that, when I found it, I went from like a guy who like kind of liked elk hunting to a guy who was like, I need to actually put in work year round so that I can make this thing happen. So if you aren't already paying attention to Dan and Elk Shape, you guys definitely need to. But yeah, that's not why we're here to talk about all that stuff. We can talk about it a little bit more at the end, but we want to hear some of your favorite hunting stories, Dan. So has anything come to mind? Anything that you want to kick us off with as far as your favorite story, or something, maybe a story you've never told someone before? Whatever you want, set the stage.
Sure. What species, man? I hunt a ton. I mean, a lot more than your average guy. So
yeah,
I have a million stories. What animal?
Let's start. What's your favorite antelope hunt? I don't have too many antelope stories, and I know that I was on your podcast briefly to ask you a bunch of questions about antelope hunting, so I'd love to hear about some of your successes there.
Antelope hunting's dumb with a bow. I think with a rifle, it's a way better idea. Just get to 200 yards, whatever, 3, and it's a done deal. But with a bow, hunting antelope, it's just a pain in the dick. It's a pretty tough endeavor,
yeah.
Especially if you hunt places that are not good. Like I would say Idaho's not the best state to hunt antelope. Sure, they have some, but Colorado's okay. Nevada's pretty good, but they're stingy. Utah's got them, but they're fairly stingy with their tags. South Dakota's amazing, but the seasons aren't always great. Wyoming is Mecca, right? There's more antelope than people in Wyoming. But maybe not after this winter. It's been a rough year. But yeah, so I've been doing public land antelope hunting for quite a while. And all my hunting stories really revolve around how, like tactically speaking, how are you going to kill them? Spot and stock, it's going to be tough to kill them with like low sagebrush, right? Like if you have teeny tiny sagebrush and it's flat, no terrain topography, and even if you think somewhere's flat, actually it's not that flat. There are contours, there are little rises, And antelope typically travel in patterns where they can always see. Their vision's insane, as you probably know. So a lot of the times I've had good luck hunting antelope over water, which is pretty typical for archery guys in a pop-up ground blind or whatever. And then there's also like the evolution of it. So in 2006, I told my job, I was running a gym in Boise, Idaho. It's called Gold's Gym, right there in Meridian off the freeway. Somebody listening will know what I'm talking about. And I was running the personal training department, and I was also running or managing the speed school, which was attached to the gym. And I'd been there for a year, and I had signed a year contract. They recruited me, and I knew they were not going to give me September off. And so when I had that conversation with the owner, I just basically said, hey, I know you're not going to give me September off, but I'm going to give you my 2 weeks notice. And it was August 1st. And he's like, okay, well, we accept your notice immediately, which caught me way off guard, but he didn't want me hanging around slacking for 2 weeks. So
just walked out the door.
Yeah. And so what ended up happening is I was like, okay, well, elk don't start till August 30th. What am I going to do? I got another month's rent here in Boise. So I went and bought an antelope tag, and this is back when you could just buy an antelope tag and hunt the Owyhee Desert down in southwest Idaho. And so I had 2 weeks to scout, and then season opened August 15th. Well, if you guys ever been in the Owyhee Desert, it's very expansive. And the antelope densities, based on my experience, was like they were really spread out. There was not really like, oh, you go here and this is where you'll find them. So I covered a ton of country. And the funny, I guess this is the kind of stuff you're looking for. At the time, I drove a Hummer, like an H2 Hummer wrapped. And it was wrapped, and it was called Precy Speed School. And it was very obvious. I mean, it was leased by the company I worked for, and I got the keys to it. And so and it was on like giant wheels with like low pro tires, mainly rims. And it was huge. And it probably should not have been taken off-road, even though it was a Hummer. And dude, I remember driving that Hummer in the Owyhee Desert through some terrible places. Looking back now as a 42-year-old man, I'd be like, Dan, that is the dumbest idea ever, because you're going to get a flat tire and you're dumb. But I drove that Hummer all over the Owyhee Desert scouting for antelope, and then eventually got obviously pulled out of the deal and started just hanging out and hunting. And I remember I'd bought my first real dirt bike. It was a 2006 CRF 250X. Obviously, I had to give the Hummer back when they accepted my two weeks resignation. And I started dirt biking and trying to find an isolated water hole. And I finally found the water hole, bro. Like, the antelope tracks were covered all over it. It was remote. This is pre-OnX. So like I would go to Sportsman's Warehouse and print off topographical maps.
Wow.
Based on the area. And I like found water holes to check and like wrote down. So I was new to antelope hunting, and Idaho had this rule where you could not the BLM has a rule where you cannot put a ground blind out. And I believe this rule is still prevalent today, is you can't put a blind out until 10 days prior to the season. So being 20 something years old, I was like, okay, at first light of the 10th day prior to the opener, I'm going to be at this water hole putting up my blind. I didn't know if anyone else knew about it or whatever. So I get up really early. I get my bike loaded. I head to the desert. I unload the dirt bike. I get the ground blind on my backpack, and I'm riding into this miraculously remote, amazing water hole. And I pull up, and there's two guys sleeping on the ground in sleeping bags, and they have two pop-up blinds already at the water. And I woke them up because it's like first light, right? Like, it had just gotten light, and I was convinced like they cheated. Like, you cheated. And they're like, dude, they talk to me and they're like, kid, it's 10 days. So as soon as it's midnight, we put these blinds up. But we've been hunting this water hole for 20 years. We'll be tagged out after like a day, and then you can come in and hunt. And that was the first time I kind of realized that hunting pressure, and this is pre-social media, really, like, dude, it's competitive. And that was like my first battle I lost over ground blind. I did eventually scent that water hole. It took those guys a week to tag out. And then it was shit hunting, honestly. I remember I saw for 7 days straight was a vast supply of wild horses coming in and getting water and no antelope. And that was my first time really sitting in a ground blind from sun up to sundown. I didn't know how hot they get inside a ground blind because it's all black. Plus you're in the desert, and I was reading books and I was running out of water, and I just told myself, stay in here, you'll get one. I never got one. And so that was like a solitary confinement sentence. And as far as ground blinds go, I remember I had ground blind wars not too long ago. So found a new spot to hunt in, I guess we'll call it Southeast Idaho. And I remember like there was a pretty long stretch of BLM bordering a pivot. And the antelope, for whatever reason, and there's a lot of them there, they will feed in the alfalfa fields, which seems like almost all day. But if you pay attention, there's little bands and groups that like duck under the fence, because antelope do not like to jump over fence. So they slide under and they create slides.
I got a story about that. I'll tell you when you're done here.
Okay. So then they're kind of going back and forth all day long, eating sage or coming back in eating alfalfa. And I'm not sure if like maybe the alfalfa is too rich where they got to backfill with some sage, but it didn't take me long to figure this out. And I noticed there was 2 ground blinds about a mile apart. So I, being the smart guy, walked to the fence and found that the 2 guys in the ground blinds had blocked every slide except for the ones in front of them. And I was like, well, this is public land. So I unblocked one between the 2 of them and put a blind about 40 yards away. And I noticed that's kind of what they did. 40 yards from the blind, it seemed like that. And I just got in that ground blind or whatever. And long story longer is like, I could see that through the mirage. I could see one blind. I could see when antelope went through. I could see if the guy shot at or missed or hit one, and vice versa. Well, one of the guys eventually came up to me. Like he got out of his blind, walked up to me, and he was kind of like chewing my ass that I unblocked the slide or whatever. And, you know, my default public land, just from lots of reps with other public land hunters, is to approach people with the mentality of like, hey, I'm rooting for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, Strogan? Like if they understand that I'm actually rooting for them, not rooting against them, and that their success will not get in the way of mine, and vice versa. That has been the greatest approach. But anyways, I didn't really win this battle. This guy was pretty determined for me not to be there. And it was another one of those deals where he's like, where are you camped? I want you to take your blind down. When I kill, I'll leave my blind out and you can sit in my blind when I'm done. Yeah. And somehow, some way I agreed to those terms. Looking back, I wish I hadn't. And again, of course, takes him several days to finally kill. He did. He was a man of his word, came over, told me. I did sit in his blind. I never killed. So the next year, I remembered my 10-day rule. So I drove 12 hours from my house, and wouldn't you know, Dan is at that fence line at midnight with my headlights on, and I took his spot, and I put his spot in quotations. And I remember I drove home because, you know, it's going to sit out there for 10 days. And I was there on opening morning, and I got in my blind in the dark. And as it's getting light, I see that he has set his blind up on the other side of the slide. And he is in his ground blind. And he must have not worn a headlamp because I didn't see him get in either. And I'm like So now you can see if an antelope goes under the fence, if I shoot at it, he is directly behind the target. And if he shoots at it, I'm directly behind the target. So we ended up getting face to face, arguing over the spot. We made a deal, a public land deal, where we would trade blind sitting every other day. And I will tell you, honestly, that is the last year I've dicked around with that spot.
I imagine.
And I hate actually hunting slides, ground blinds, water, anywhere where someone else. And so I've actually gone to spot and stock antelope 100% committed for the last 6 seasons and have had 100% success that way and no run-ins. What's your story with ground blinds and slides?
Well, so obviously I got on your podcast, asked you all the questions I could think of. And so I bring my ground blind. I'm like, all right, let's find some water. We're out there in southeastern Colorado, public land. It's just national forest, national grasslands. But we're out there and there is a water tank every half mile. And I'm like, like, how do I possibly, and they're all overflowing. So I'm like, how do I possibly know which one to put it down? So the blind, we find the first one and we pop it up thinking, oh, this is such a great spot. And then we just kept finding water holes. So we left it there for a few days while we drove around, learned all sorts of things. Like, a question I didn't know to ask is like, when do you pull over the car, right? So we learned you don't just spot an antelope and stop because they're going to spook. So you got to drive past them. You drive right past them. They don't care. Find your spot and come back around to them. Either way, the very first antelope we ran into that day, and this is about the slide under the fence, and I've told this on the podcast before, but we just see a group of antelope, and my buddy's driving, I'm shotgun, and I'm like, I'll just jump out of the car. And they sort of booger, so they're running off, and I'm like, all right, you drive after them and try and go around because we can see the roads on the Onyx. I'm like, push them back to me. I'll hide behind the one bush. Like, there's no topography. We're on a chessboard, basically, with one bush on it. So I'm like walking over to that bush. Next thing I know, I look back to the road, and my buddy's driving easily 65 miles an hour, honking his horn. Apparently what happened is he went forward, and they just kept running, and then instead of getting around them, they shot across, all except one. That one antelope turned back and started heading back towards me. So he was trying to keep it from joining its buddy. So he's having a race with this antelope, and that antelope runs by me at maybe 20 yards. Just full speed, 20 yards. I'm like, well, I'm, archery hunting. I got no chance. But he comes up on a fence, does not even slow down. Like, just liquid Terminator right under it. Like, I was just waiting for him to, like, catch his horns and flip around and to, like, crash violently. But it's crazy how they go through those fences like that. So, yeah, that was crazy experience. And then I was like, what the fuck happened? He explained it all to me, and I was like, oh, that's absolutely ridiculous. But it was something I don't think many people have ever experienced, having a goat run by them that close. They're so fast. But then, my injury with we ended up going to spot and stock, obviously, because we weren't having any luck finding the water. Like, we put a camera up on our blind that we set up, not one picture of anything but cows. Like, that's it, just cows. After elk season, when I hurt my back, when it was good enough where I could at least walk and sit, I was like, all right, well, I can't go hike around the mountains. I know that my back can't handle that, but maybe I can go antelope hunt.
Yeah.
So I go, and I took all the things I learned from those 4 days of hunting antelope and some of the stuff that we went over, and I find a solo buck, and I just drive by, and I get into a spot, and I literally take that 4-mile loop and get right behind him. And I'm coming up and over this hillside thinking he's 30 yards up and over this, if I can just get a little bit farther. And I come up, and I guess wrong by about 20 yards as to his location. So I was thinking he's in front of me, and he was actually to the left of me about like 20 additional yards. So when I came up, he had his eyes on me. If I had gone a little bit farther down, I would have had him. Turns out to be a blessing in disguise, because I told my buddy I was going to do this, and I didn't want to drive all the way down to southeast Colorado. That's like a 6-hour drive for me. He's like, there's another place up north, check it out. And I go and I hunt all day, and I'm arrow knocked, ready to kill this thing. Turns out I run into another hunter later, and we're just chatting, shooting the shit. And he's like, yeah, I can't believe I spent my points on this unit. And I'm like, what? Points? This isn't over the counter. And he's like, no, this is, and I'm like, hold on. So I go back to my truck, check my phone. Yeah, I've been hunting all day in a unit I don't have a tag for. So it's a good thing I didn't kill it. But I was damn close, and I absolutely could have. And I've learned some things as far as like Onyx. They have that rangefinder feature. Like, for anyone out there, if you get an animal and you're gonna make a big stock on it, range find that, use the OnX rangefinder feature to get an exact pin of where that animal is, or at least within a proximity. Because I've now done that 2 or 3 times where I came up about 20 yards off of where I thought I needed to be and spooked the animal. So it was a fun season. Like, I can't wait to get back out there and do it again, but no luck for me this year.
Dude, antelope are crazy. The whole premise of hunting them from a truck, I do have a spot where I've killed a few from the truck, and what it does require a partner. So there's an alfalfa field bordering BLM type vibe, and it's very close to a paved road. And so there's a giant cattle guard, and there's a ditch underneath it that kind of parallels where they cross this ditch every day to go to and from. So we figured this out. I don't know how the hell we figured this out, but between my buddy Tyler and I, we've probably killed, I don't know, 4 or 5 bucks this way, where we have figured out a way to where if the truck never comes to a complete stop over the cattle guard and you jump out of the passenger, and so truck's rolling, you jump out, truck keeps rolling, and it drives off. The antelope don't even flinch. And then there you are in the bottom, you're on pavement, and you have to like crawl under the road, get into this little ditch, crawl around. And what ends up happening is it actually works out to where if you get in this ditch and you just hang out, because you can't get to this little ambush spot. Like if they're in the field and see you walking there, they're going to make a note of that. Yeah. But if they don't see you, there's a good chance, give it a couple hours, they're going to leave the pivot and head to go eat sage. And that's when you get your opportunity. So I do appreciate that style. It is potent. I do think it does work, but man, no, I think antelope's cool. Where I hunt, especially the rattlesnake population, like rattlesnakes are, I've hunted all over Nevada and I've never ran into a rattlesnake. Doesn't mean they're not there. Same with my home state, Washington. We got tons of rattlesnakes. I just never bumped into one. Yeah. But I run into double-digit rattlesnakes every year I antelope hunt, guaranteed. And it's where I'm hunting. There's just like a pocket of area where that's where they den. And there must be food sources for them there. And it sucks, man. Like I still can't get used to the fact of crawling on my belly towards antelope. And then you hear that, and the buzzworm is a yard away from you. Dude, that stuff sucks. And so that's my least favorite part of antelope hunting. Have you ran into any rattlers?
No, man, you told me about it. A bunch of other people told me about it. They also said, watch out for tarantulas. Where we are is like a couple months later is a giant tarantula migration, like just crazy. But I didn't see one tarantula, didn't see one rattlesnake. So I felt pretty good about that because I have no interest at all in running into those things. One other experience from my antelope hunt that is a direct correlation to stuff you preach is I went on a stalk. It was a bad one. The antelope saw me. I don't even know what I was doing, crawling, bear crawling, whatever. I was covered in cactus, 90 degrees. 45 minutes later, they finally booger off because some other truck parked and they just ran. I stand up and I have no idea where my release is. Literally no idea. Like, I think I had it in my pocket. I rolled under a barbed wire fence and it fell out, but I don't know where I went under. So I did have another release. The hunt wasn't over. So thank you, of course, for that advice, because that saved like 2 more days of hunting. And then I used that release for a few months, and I just picked up another backup. So important thing to note, man, because it's real. I don't know. We spent 2 hours looking for it. No idea what happened to it. So
yeah, I lost a handheld last year, antelope hunting, of all places. And I can tell you, I didn't look for 2 hours because I honestly had no idea where it came out. And I was like, shit. So it happens, man. I love antelope meat, but it is a daunting task to shoot those little buggers that don't even yield that much protein. They're just not a big animal, but they're fun to bow hunt. They're it's cool. Just challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I told you last time the goal for me for antelope hunting at the time was reps. Because, like, I'm new to archery, so I was like, I want to get more reps. If I'm going to be better at killing elk, if I can get more reps at antelope, I think I'll be better for elk. And I absolutely got better over the course of that weekend that we were hunting. So, it was fun, man. It was a lot of fun. But cool. Dan, what other stories do you got? Do you have an elk story you want to share? I feel we got elk shape on. We should talk about elk.
Yeah, I mean
Anyone that
that's
stands out, you tell me. Whether it's the first hunt with your dad's first hunt, anything that stands out. You tell me. I don't know your life.
yeah. My dad and I have a lot of fun historical hunts together. We're very opposite personality. He's really laid back. He's a hard worker, but he's really chill, go with the flow. Whereas I'm really tightly wound,
Yeah.
very type A, and that's not him. And so that's kind of start off the foundation of like that's our personalities as and we get along great.
Yeah.
But we have had several times on the mountains where it's been a like F you, no F you, and like we're fighting over elk hunting. And that's the best, man. But no, honestly, God, I have some good ones, man. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share some of them, but um, I'll tell you, I'm not going to name names on this one, but
That's fine.
there was a time, there was a time where, oh, I guess I can name a few names. I'll tell you, this happened in 2011, that was the first season. I think I killed 3 archery bulls in a season. And
Yeah.
it's just because I had,
Damn.
I had the tags, and nowadays that kind of is a hot topic. Whereas in 2011, it'd be like, "Holy shit, high five, good job." Whereas now, you'll hear from haters like you're killing for content, or you're taking more than you need, or whatever else that pussies would want to say. And that's right, I called y'all pussies. I killed 3 elk, man, and it was awesome. I don't regret it. The first one I killed in Washington, it was a draw tag. I hunted 11 days in the backcountry. Horses, set up our camp. Everything was going great. And then a wildfire literally blew up on us. So when we got there,
Oh shit.
and now we're 11 miles from the road, and we all rode horse. I walked in, my dad walked in, and then my buddy Dave, he rode his horse and then all his horses with all our gear. We set up the sickest backcountry, like the tent, the canvas
Yeah.
tent and everything. It was sick, man. We were in the backcountry. Now, when we got there, we saw the wildfire, and it was just kind of like simmering. It was very chill, wasn't a big deal. Definitely wasn't putting out a lot of smoke.
Yeah.
We had a couple days to scout. I mean, I'd taken me 12 years to draw this tag. I had already put in 4 different scouting trips, backpacking in this area. Like, we knew where to go. We knew why we were camping, where we were camping. And bulls were screaming when we got there September 1st, which was awesome, right? September 2nd, day after the opener, me and Dave are on a ridge. My dad's kind of back at camp glassing, and all of a sudden there's a wall of smoke. We can't even see camp. All of a sudden there's helicopters. All of a sudden there are like actual smoke jumpers jumping out of planes and landing right at our camp. And so we end up trying to like stop elk hunting and get back to our camp. And there's a ranger there, and the Forest Service Rangers like, you guys need to evacuate this fire
Leave
because
your
the wind.
shit. Let's go.
Yeah, the winds had really picked up, and that's what got the fire going again. And it was ripping, and fires go uphill better than downhill, right? Heat rises and the direction of the wind and the heel of the fire, and where we were located, we were going to get burnt. So we fortunately got all the stuff off the mountain, but that's like all my eggs were in that end of the unit. Like that's the only part of the unit I knew to go, and we had it figured out. So we had to go back to this 1-horse town and get maps and figure out how to hunt the south end. So we did that. We relocated, and Dave got us back in there.
Did you
And
get out with all the
this
stuff? Like, did they make you just run, or were you able to get
no,
camp
we
out?
were able to. My dad was
Okay.
able to pack up most of the camp by the time we got there. So we loaded and went and relocated, got back up in a different side of the unit. This was now an 18-mile horse ride
Jesus.
to be where we were going to be. And I hate horses and all that kind of stuff. Just hunting with horses is a lot of responsibility. Anyways, I'm going to tell the story pretty fast because I'm going to go into a few versions of it. One, the horses got colic. They were eating some shit they weren't supposed to, and that's where their guts kind of like are twisted up and they're not pooping. They need to go
bloated.
to the vet.
Yeah.
Bloated. So Dave is like, guys, I don't care about my horse, but these other two are my wife's. I have to get them to the vet. So I'm going to take all the horses, but I'll leave you guys some gear, and I'll come back in a couple days and check in on you. If you get something killed, whatever. Spoiler alert, Dave never comes back. Never.
Jesus Christ.
So we are 18 miles from my truck. I decide to kill a bull 2 days later. And we're looking at our maps, not on our phones, and we realize we can go 18 miles down the horse trail to the truck, or we can take a straight line through this really shitty downfall, but it is only 5 miles to a road that dead ends. And I killed a really good bull. In fact, one of my best bulls I've ever killed. Just one of the heaviest bulls you've ever seen. And we're on cloud 9. And so my dad and I are like, to get to the horse trail, first of all, it's 1,200 vertical up, and then it's 18 miles out. No, let's just go 5 miles downhill. I don't care how much downfall there is. We'll just zigzag our way through it, and we'll dump the meat at the road. We'll 2-trip this thing out. And then we'll figure out how to get camp out later. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we first trip out is just meat, no antlers, and we're cruising along maybe a mile from the carcass, and we hit the ultimate backcountry marijuana grow. The ultimate.
No shit.
Trash bags everywhere.
Can I ask what state this is?
Washington.
Okay.
Fertilizer everywhere. Just garbage everywhere. I'm not packing heat. I don't even have my bow. My bow's with the carcass. I just have a hind quarter and a front shoulder, and my dad's got a hind quarter. We're like shit. We're like this. And marijuana plants are in the ground. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're sketched the F out. So we're trying to stay in the very bottom of the creek, not make noise where the creek's loud. We slither out. We finally get to this road. Okay. We dump the meat. We didn't know, like, at least we're on a road. Well, we still had to walk probably 7 miles on the road to get to our trucks.
Yeah.
So 5 + 7 is 12 miles, and most of those on road versus 18 on a horse trail, plus the 1,200 vertical gain to get there. We were happy with our decision. So what we ended up doing is we spent the night at my truck once we got there. And in the morning, we drove to town and we reported this marijuana grow. Okay. Dude, we thought we did the right thing. The rangers like asking really strange questions that aren't really having to do with the marijuana grow. I'm very he's asking us more like hunting questions, like, where did you kill that bull? Where did he die? Why did you pack him out that way? Like, he was very confused about where we were and kept asking weird questions as to pertain to where the bull's carcass was. And we're like, dude, are you not hearing us about the marijuana grow? And then at the very end of the conversation, it got weirder. He's like, well, that marijuana grow, we actually just busted a couple days ago, if it's the one I'm thinking. So you don't have to worry about, like, it's a cartel thing. We busted it, but we haven't had a chance to clean it up.
And when you went through, was there there was no people there, obviously, right? Just the grow, just like all the trash and debris and all that stuff.
The grow was so big that we didn't know for sure.
Okay, gotcha.
But there was plants in the ground. Okay. And we were like, let's get the fuck out of here. So we got kind of interrogated by the forest ranger guy about the hunt, which was weird. I didn't think much of it. We had more meat to go get. So we ended up getting my truck, driving it and parking it where the meat was, and going straight back 5 miles through the downfall up to the carcass, got the last load, got everything out, head down to the valley. And basically we had most of our hunting gear except for all our backcountry camping stuff. And we called Dave and we're like, hey man, like we got all the meat here in town hanging. Do we have to go get camp or can you come back and get camp? He's like, well, my horses are still sick, but I'll come get it in a couple of days. And I was like, sweet, I got more elk tags. I'll head to Idaho. So we go to the town cooler to get the meat. Like we had some meat hanging, and I get in there and the lady's like, hey, I think the game warden wants to talk to you. And so I can't give you your meat until he talks to you. And I was like, thinking it was about the marijuana grow. And I was like, okay, that's cool. How long is he going to be? And she's like, I don't know. He said it sounded like he was only 5 minutes out. I was like, cool. I waited for an hour. Now I hadn't seen my wife in 12 days. Yeah. And I have 2 elk tags in Idaho. I waited for about 2 hours. And then I told the lady, I'm like, get me my meat. Here's my number. I already told the forest ranger all I know about the marijuana grow. She's like, okay, there's nothing she could do. So I was like, she gets all my meat, gets my, loads it in my truck. I got the rack. I got all my hunting gear. I'm pulling out and the game warden shows up.
Of course. That's how it works,
flags me down. Yeah. And I'm still very innocent at this point, as far as I don't think there's a problem. But as you're going to find out, there's a major problem. Game warden separates me and my dad, gets me in his truck and starts asking me a whole slew of questions, very similar to that Forest Service ranger. Nothing about the marijuana grow, all about why did I pack my elk out the way I did? And he was insinuating that I had killed him in the wrong unit, basically. And This is pre-GPS era. So it's not like you could pull up your OnX and be like, here's a pen, bitch, go hike up there and see for yourself. It wasn't like that. But this guy was giving me what I would call a full-on interrogation, good cop and bad cop, as well as just basically admit you shot this bull in the wrong unit. Yeah. And I'm like, sir, no way. I know the boundaries. I researched the crap out. I've spent 4 weekends scouting. We definitely packed this bull out of the unit that we like, out of our unit and through another unit. Sure. But no way. And so basically I had to like describe to him how to get to the carcass. Yeah. And I told him, go up there, you'll see right now. And I even volunteered to like not go hunting and to go take him to the carcass right then and there, which I didn't really want to take another step. I was smoked. Sure. He's like, you know what? I'll go up there tomorrow. I'll check it out. But I am going to have to hold on to your meat and your rack until I can go do that. And then once I do that, you just got to have to come down and get it. But go ahead and go home, see your wife. So that's what I do. I'm thinking no big deal. It's all good. So I drive home, see the missus, and I wait a full day for his phone call. Nothing. So I start calling him. I got his cell phone. I got his card. He's not answering. A couple days go by, and I'm like burning precious September. So I'm like, you know what? There's really out of my control. I was really like worried about the meat, and I was worried about those big horns. And so anyway, I went to Idaho, and I'm going to tell you the Idaho stories. I ended up killing 2 bulls in Idaho over the next couple weeks. Fast forward to the end of the season, I get a citation in the mail for killing that bull in the wrong unit. And I know that I didn't. So I lawyer up. Now, I've never, ever had a conviction or a charge or a warning, nothing from anyone ever to this day. I try to do everything by the book.
Yeah, you have to.
Now, I do. And you still can make mistakes unknowingly, but I knew I was in the right. So I lawyered up and I got a good one. I won that like used to be like the DA, not DA, prosecuting attorney.
Okay.
Okay. He used to be a prosecuting attorney. So he used to try to prosecute cases like this up in, and his last name, I can't remember. Anyways, he was awesome. And he looked at the case and he's like, basically like, dude, we're going to F their S up. Like this, they did everything wrong. And so long story short, never had a charge, everything dropped. But here's the deal. I had the decision to make to like go after them for my elk meat because they had given my elk meat away the very next day because we have record of it.
No shit.
So like the day that he was supposed to go check that carcass, he never did. There's no record. He never went up and verified. And then he donated my meat away. And so then I had to lawyer up, which cost me money. We never had to go to court. They dropped it. And then I went down back to this town to pick up my horns. And so that's my hunting story nightmare of a limited entry tag,
12 years,
wildfires, colic, marijuana, game warden, and it's like, is this like, that was so long ago that I just laugh because it's like, seems like there's always some sort of hardship or drama when you're elk hunting, man.
That's ridiculous. There's a lot going on in that story, man. That's a good one. Have you ever gone back to the spot and like dropped a pin or like gone on X and be like, yeah, no, I was definitely right? Or how far from the actual border were you?
So the border that was in question is a imaginary line on a ridge, which kind of sucks that it's not like a watershed. Like, yeah, I like borders that are watersheds or like, that kind of thing. But we definitely were like, as the crow flies, not very far, probably 600 yards as the crow flies from the border.
But plenty.
But yeah. Actual hiking distance, probably almost an hour just to get out of our unit into that unit. Yeah. And then 5 miles down to the nearest road. So yes, I've verified for sure. It's just I love that what game wardens do. And I'm not saying they're all like that guy that I dealt with, but I think that guy I dealt with was just like either just not willing to put into work, or maybe he got busy with another call, but he just didn't do his due diligence. He really needed to hike up there. Now on my end, I needed to have a waypoint. I needed to have like a hard, like, go here. Yeah. Instead of trying to describe to him, which he's probably never even been to there because he's busy writing, patrolling and whatever, very little time in the backcountry. But the lessons that I took away from that was like a couple things. And I'm just going to keep it really real. I only tell game wardens whatever. I only answer the questions that they are asking me in as short amount of sentence as possible, in as few words as possible, because put yourself in their shoes. They deal with a lot of sketchy people that they don't trust. Oh, yeah. And so they shouldn't trust you, and I wouldn't trust you if I was in their position. So now I don't freely offer up a ton of information, but I'm very cooperative. Obviously with OnX and things like that nowadays, you can truly know where you go. But the thing that I think a lot of people don't do is they don't read regulations from cover to cover. And if you hunt multiple states like I do, those states vary from state to state. And there's a bunch of nuanced rules that you really need to know. Some states require proof of sex attached to the carcass. Others don't. Yeah. You have to know that. And same with like the lessons learned for me was like, hey, do everything in your power to know all the rules. And honestly, like if you find a marijuana grow, don't report it because you're just going to cause trouble for yourself. Yeah, right. We were trying to do the right thing on that deal, and ended up raising suspicion because of the path we took. And honestly, I look at it now, and not a lot of people have heard this story. Honestly, I thought about writing an article about it one time and just slamming Washington State Fish and Game because of how shitty it went. But I just tell it now as a learning lesson for those to like, man, I'm not sure what the lessons are exactly, just other than like sometimes you're right and stand your ground. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, for sure. I can't believe they gave away your meat before they validated anything. That's just absolutely ridiculous.
That was the worst. Because that was the longest, that is still to this day, the hardest pack out I've ever done.
I bet. Downfall's the worst. Like,
That's the only reason.
I was just waiting to hear you say that you went down through the downfall and decided the next trip, the 18 miles or whatever on the horse trail, would have been easier, because downfall can just completely crush your soul and your hips, right?
Yes.
So cool, Dan. And that was an awesome story. I know we have limited time here, so let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. Thank you again for coming on. Thank you again for, in fact, inspiring this whole thing. Basically, you and Chris Rowe did it. The other half of the story is
Awesome.
that driving home from your elk camp, I was 9 hours into Chris Rowe and Jay Scott's turkey calling series, and I was like, I can't handle it anymore. I need stories. I don't want to just hear why turkeys gobble. Brilliant series. I recommend it to everyone, but not in one sitting like I did it. Either way, man, why don't we tell the people where they can find you if they're interested in checking more out from Elk Shape and Dan?
Yeah, just look up Elk Shape wherever you want, and you'll probably find us. But man, kudos to you. Thanks for having me on, man. We'll have to do it again, because there's another story that same year that involves a really good friend, another really bad pack out, and a grown ass man peeing on purpose in my cabin, not in a toilet. So to be continued.
On purpose? Was there alcohol involved?
Of course.
Yeah. I think I have that same friend. All right, man. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it, buddy. And yeah, have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. Appreciate y'all. Take care, man.
All right, guys. That's it. Another couple stories in the books. Again, Dan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and of course for firing me up enough to actually get this podcast up and running. Everybody out there, you should be thanking Dan Staton. And like you mentioned, go ahead and Google him, Elk Shape. If you don't know who he is, he puts great content out there from archery, fitness, elk hunting. The guy will light a fire under you like he has under me. So again, Dan, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your stories. To all you listeners, thank you guys very much for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed Dan's stories as much as I did. Now, go out there, share the podcast with some friends. Make sure we get some more listeners reaching out with some stories of their own. And then beyond that, go out there and make some stories of your own.